Okay, so picture this. 40 long years wandering in the wilderness, an entire generation is gone, and now the nation of Israel is standing right on the edge of the plains of Moab, looking out over the Jordan River at the Promised Land. They are literally on the brink of a whole new future. But before they can take that next step, they first have to take stock of who they are now. This is that story, a powerful moment of transition from the book of Numbers. So get this number in your head, 1,820. On the surface, it seems, well, almost like nothing, right? After 4 decades of hardship, rebellion, and, let's be honest, divine punishment, the total number of fighting men in Israel went down by only 1,820. It's such a tiny net change that it hides this massive, sweeping story of transformation, loss, and the birth of a brand new nation. And really, that's the heart of what we're digging into today. This isn't just about spreadsheets and head counts. It's the story of 2 completely different generations. You have the first, the one that walked out of Egypt in triumph, but was ultimately fated to wander and die in the wilderness. And then you have the second, born in that very wilderness, who is now destined to finally inherit the promise. So to really unpack this pivotal moment, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll kick things off with that 40-year reset and the census of this new nation. Then we'll dive into a really surprising question about inheritance that actually changed the law. After that, we'll witness a leader's final heavy task. And finally, we'll see how the torch is passed to the next generation. All right, first up, this second census wasn't just some routine update. No. It was a massive dividing line. It marked the end of an entire era that was frankly defined by failure, and the official beginning of a new one, defined by hope. Before the nation could move forward, an entire generation had to pass away first. So you've got these 2 censuses, right? One at the beginning, one at the end, basically bookending this whole 40-year journey. But the years in between, they were anything but quiet. We're talking catastrophic events, like the Korah Rebellion and the absolutely devastating plague at Baal of Peor. These moments radically reshaped the nation tribe by tribe. Okay, that brings us to the actual count. With the conquest of Canaan right around the corner, this new census was absolutely critical. It was about so much more than just counting heads. This was about getting a nation ready for war and for peace, for taking the land and for settling in it.
So why the big rush to count everyone? What was the point? Well, it all boiled down to 2 crucial things. First up, the military angle. How many men aged 20 and up are actually ready for battle? And second, a question of justice. Once we conquer this land, how are we going to divide it up fairly? This count was going to give them the answers to both.
And here they are, the big picture numbers. That first census, right after the Exodus, clocked in at 603,550 men. 40 years later, the second one counted 601,730. That tiny net decrease of 1,820 is honestly staggering when you think about it. But as we're about to see, it masks some huge, dramatic shifts happening under the surface. And this is where we see the real story start to unfold behind the numbers. Look at the tribe of Simeon. They were absolutely decimated, losing over 37,000 men. A catastrophic drop that's often tied to their heavy involvement in the idolatry at Baal of Peor. But in stark contrast, you have the tribe of Manasseh, who just thrived, growing by more than 20,000. See, these weren't just random dips and spikes. They were reflections of faithfulness and consequence. But here's the most mind-blowing fact of all. Out of the more than 600,000 men who stood at Mount Sinai for that very first count, only 2 were left to be counted this time around, Joshua and Caleb. Just 2. The entire generation of the Exodus was gone, fulfilling the divine decree. This census officially slammed that chapter shut. All right, so in the middle of all this massive national-level undertaking, a deeply personal issue bubbles up to the surface. It turns out the census wasn't just about military strength. It was about land, family, and legacy. And for 5 incredibly brave women, it was a matter of justice. This was the powerful plea from the daughters of a man named Zelophehad. You see, their father had died, but he had no sons to carry on his name and receive his portion of the land. Under the way things were, his entire legacy was about to be just erased. So they did something bold. They brought their case directly to Moses. And what they did next gives us this really fascinating peek into how lawmaking actually worked back then. It wasn't always just a top-down decree. In this case, you have citizens,
these 5 women, who raise a totally legitimate problem. Their leader, Moses, doesn't just make a decision on his own, he takes it to God. God then provides the ruling, which becomes a new, binding law for the whole nation. And the result was this incredibly compassionate and honestly wise new law. It protected daughters, it preserved the family lineage, and it showed a legal system that was capable of adapting to real human needs. A person's legacy would no longer depend solely on having a son.
So Moses has organized the new nation, he's overseen the census, he's even helped amend the law. But now he has to confront his own future. Or, more accurately, the fact that he won't be a part of the nation's next chapter in the Promised Land.
It's one of the most poignant and kind of tough questions in this entire narrative, isn't it? After everything he did, after leading these people for 40 years through so much, why was Moses himself forbidden from going in?
Well, the answer really has 2 layers to it. The direct, on-the-surface reason is his act of anger at Kadesh, where he struck the rock instead of speaking to it, failing to represent God's holiness properly before the people. But there's also a deeper, symbolic interpretation. Moses, as the giver of the law, represents what the law does. Theologically speaking, the law can point you to the promise, it can lead you right to the border, but it can't actually bring you in. Only faith, represented by his successor, can do that. Knowing his time is almost up, Moses shifts to his last, and maybe his most crucial task, making sure there's a smooth transition of power. He actually pleads with God to appoint a new leader, so the people won't be left like sheep without a shepherd. And God's choice is clear. It's Joshua. And I mean, just look at this guy's resume. He had the Spirit of God in him. He had spent decades as Moses' right-hand man, his apprentice. He was one of only 2 spies who came back from Canaan with a report of faith. And he was already a proven military commander. The man was uniquely and perfectly prepared for this moment.
And with Joshua's appointment, we see this really clear structure for how the government is supposed to work. It's not a dictatorship, not a one-man show. Instead, God's will be revealed to the high priest, Eleazar, who would then communicate it to the leader, Joshua, who would then direct the people. It's a clear chain of command, flowing right from God.
There's a really powerful theological connection here that goes even deeper. The name Joshua, Yehoshua in Hebrew, it literally means the Lord is salvation. So for many, his role in leading the people into the land is seen as this incredible picture, a foreshadowing of a much greater salvation that's still to come.
And all of that leaves us with a pretty big thought to chew on. This ancient story about succession, about preparing one generation to hand off responsibility to the next, it's timeless. It forces us to ask, right? Whether it's in our families, our workplaces, or our communities, what qualities are truly essential when it's our turn to pass the torch?